The holidays are one of the few times a year we might have the whole family get together. This makes it an ideal time to have some thoughtful yet critical conversations about everyone's personal health care preferences.
Here to tell us why it's important to have conversations about end-of-life wishes is Sanford Director of Health Ministries, Lois Ustanko. Thank you so much for being here. We were talking during the break about this can be a very difficult conversation. You said no, it can be a very powerful conversation. How do you reframe it so everyone in the family feels empowered by it?
Well, I think to think of it that way, that it is a powerful conversation, and one of the things that most of us don't want to have happen is to get to the bedside of someone that we love and not know what they would want, and to have to make important decisions for them. So with love, frame, your health is changing, I'd really like to ask a few questions, is a great way to sort of open things.
And you said that the holidays especially are kind of a time when we're very much reminded of people who have passed on, so it's good to have those conversations now.
Exactly. I mean, I think of my own family, and when we gather, we're always talking about our fathers, our father-in-laws, our grandparents, and so forth. And so if you can just extend that conversation a little bit and say, was there anything about the way that they passed away that we really appreciated and valued? Was there anything that we saw happen that we wouldn't want to happen for ourselves? It can really open up the conversation, particularly for older people who might be aging and whose health is changing.
You'd mentioned, hey, is it okay if I ask you a few questions? What would be some of those questions that you would suggest that we ask the person?
Well, when I'm with my mom, she mentions her, that she's been to the doctor and she has some lab values that are changing, kidneys particularly. And so, Mom, if you get to the point where your kidneys aren't working at all, what are you thinking about dialysis, for example, specific treatments? But any health condition, you can say, what are the things that worry you most about the way your health is changing? Sometimes when you have someone that's very, very ill, cancer with cousin, what are the things you're hoping for? And that hope can be in regards to medical treatments, but it can be, most often it's about life in general, things about, how I want to live my life so that my kids have memories of me and so forth.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you'd mentioned to me was, maybe if it starts as, hey, is there anything you'd want us to do to remember you, every time, during this time of the year or something, and it might bring up then the start of that conversation.
Absolutely, and when we have facilitated conversations with people that come in to see us as advanced care planning facilitators, that's exactly what we start the conversation with is, what does a good day look like for you? How do you want to be living your life? And then we talk a little bit about, as your health changes, are there any religious or cultural factors that you might want to be thinking about to incorporate in your decision-making process? And we don't really even get to the health and specific medical interventions until late in the conversation. We really want to understand the values, beliefs, and preferences of an individual before we ever talk about specific medical interventions.
Anything specific that you should definitely not do in these conversations?
Force someone to have the conversation. It's about them and expressing the conversation. The other thing is not impose your preferences on someone else. And that's why having the conversation is really important. So again, if I use my dad as an example, he had heart failure, he had Parkinson's disease, and so life was changing. He had 7 children. The likelihood of us disagreeing at the point where his health changed and he couldn't swallow anymore, and he had to think about feeding tubes and so forth, was very, very high. But because we were able to have the conversation, he could tell us what he wanted, and we could ask questions. Why are you thinking this? Why are you going in this direction? It helps us come to an understanding of the reason for his decisions, and we were all able to support his decisions at the end.
So I'm curious, did you do, because my mom is a big family, so were you doing, like, if everyone wasn't here, conference calls? So everyone
Absolutely.
Could hear what he said? Okay.
Absolutely, yep. We did conference calls. He had individual one-on-ones, so as people did come to visit, he sat down, he put everything in writing in the form of a healthcare directive, and then he provided a copy of his healthcare directive to all of us as children, even though he had only named 2 of us as his agents, the people that would speak for him when he lost the ability to speak. but over the course of about a 2-year period. And that's one thing about advanced care planning too. It's not a one and done conversation, it's an ongoing conversation. So again, if we can change our culture to make it okay for even our children. You know, I've got a daughter that's in her 30s and she drives a lot for her job. And so, you know, every adult 18 years of age and older should be having these conversations. And I would advocate that they all have selected an agent, talk with that agent who will speak for them, and put things in the form of a written directive. But she drives for her job, and so I talk with her. One of the questions I say is, if you were in a car accident and you were brought in and you were brain injured and they told us you had less than a 2% chance of surviving, what would you want us to do? What would you not want us to do? And so those are some of the kinds of conversations that you can bring up with people.
And as you said, too, when you have these conversations, then you might better understand their wishes and be able to respect those wishes then once that time comes.
And we're very lucky in the Fargo-Moorhead area. We have a number of trained facilitators, Essentia, Sanford, Hospice of the Red River Valley. And so one of the useful things you could do is you could say, hey, Mom, I've learned this is important for me, too. Can we go together? Can we make an appointment with a facilitator and sit down together? You can understand my preferences. I can understand your preferences.
So your daughter's 30. Does she have that written out in the health directive already? Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
My family takes it very seriously. I had an aunt at 32 who came home and collapsed on the floor. She had a cerebral aneurysm. She lived for 24 years in a skilled nursing facility in what was then called a chronic vegetative state. And so we've seen the worst. It's basically a Terry Schiavo type situation. And our entire family has grown up with what happens when you don't make decisions for yourself and how you can have family conflicts, you can have legal issues that arise and so forth. So we take it very seriously.
If people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Call us at Sanford Health. You can ask for advanced care planning assistance, 234-6980.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, stay with us. We're going to wrap up Monday right after this.